Happy Friday, Baylor College of Medicine. It's been another very, very eventful week. This week I wanted to spend some time on sort of discussing a lot of the misunderstandings that are out there, because there's a lot. For one, my sister keeps calling me again about Texas being a mess. And there's a lot of national press on that because our infection rate, Governor Cuomo is now picking on Texas.
They are going up and we are going down. 27 states going up.
Mainly because we picked on him before, but they're already limiting travel from some of the southern states to the Northeast because of it. So I thought it'd be worthwhile just kind of talking about some of the data. So it's true our infection rate is increasing, and it's increasing pretty fast. It's now going about 1.4 times increase every 7 days. Early on, when we started this evaluating the data, we were going up at 3 times every 7 days. So it's not as fast as then, but we have a lot more cases. Our weekly average was averaging, as you recall, I've been saying about 200 cases every 7 days. Well, in the last 2 weeks, it's been 400 cases, and then this past week, it's been 900 cases. So that's not good. And then in our TMC database, which is really the 9 counties surrounding us, we've had over 7,000 admissions and 525 deaths. We are now testing a lot more people. We have been testing over 10,000 per week, but our positive rate, which was very low at 2 and 3%, last week went up to 8%, and this week is now over 10%. And our COVID positive patients are beginning to fill the hospital. So 15% of our beds, med surgery beds, are filled with COVID positive patients. And then now we get into the part that is really hard for people to understand. What most people are focused on, and the newspaper's been focused on, are intensive care unit beds. And in our intensive care units, 28% of our beds are filled with COVID-19 patients, meaning 72% are not filled with COVID patients. And the number that's got everybody crazy is that 97% of the intensive care units are full. And that led Governor Abbott yesterday to basically say, let's stop elective surgery because we've got to make capacity for more COVID patients to get into the intensive care unit. Now, one of the big confusions is that the hospital leadership has all been saying, wait a minute, we can manage, we've got capacity. Well, how can that be when you're at 97% full? And that is basically because there's a huge difference between an intensive care unit and intensive care. Intensive care units are little locations in a hospital that have beds in them that are really built to service intensive care patients. And so when we talk about our intensive care unit capacity, we're talking about all of the beds in an intensive care unit, a physical location. What is intensive care, though? Intensive care is we can monitor you on a regular basis, that we have an intravenous access to you, that you have respiratory ventilation available if needed, and that you have a higher nursing ratio. That is intensive care. Intensive care can be provided in my closet, not in an intensive care unit. But you have to provide all those things I just mentioned. So when the hospitals say, oh, we have capacity, it means they can provide intensive care in other locations in the hospital. It's not easy. They have to convert a regular bed to intensive care bed. It's just not in an intensive care unit. So the ability to provide intensive care for patients is really able to be flexed quite a bit. And I think that's been lost on many people. They don't quite understand why is it you say one number and you mean another. And it's not that at all. It means that the intensive care units are really full. But we can provide intensive care as needed if we hire up nursing so we can provide a better ratio, if we provide continuous monitoring, IV access, etc. So those are really the issues that are I think, the conflict in the numbers. So we have capacity because even though we are going to have more and more patients coming up, we have the ability to provide intensive care in other locations in our hospital systems, and so that's what's going on right now. That said, with the rate of doubling that we're having right now, it makes July looking like it's going to be a very bad month. And unless we begin to bend the curve of the infection rates, we're going to start running into real capacity problems towards the end of July. So, that to me is really important. And I want to just say all of these things that seem in conflict make sense. It makes sense for the governor to go like, well, the capacity is restrained. Why don't we expand capacity by limiting elective surgeries so that our intensive care units will not have all those other patients, that 72% of occupied patients that are not COVID, can be available for COVID patients. But as I said, there are other ways to take care of the patients. And this is kind of an easy analogy for me. But if you look at it, our problem is we have a bathtub that's overflowing. And you can look at one of two ways to fix that. You can get a bigger bathtub, or you can turn off the faucet. And what we have to do in this community is turn off the faucet. Because unless we really change the number of people getting infected, we are eventually going to run out of capacity no matter what. So this is really important, and the reason it's so difficult to change the faucet, to decrease the infection rate, is going to require changes in behavior. And a lot of people, when early on in this pandemic, would say to me, I don't know anybody who's been sick. Well, I've had about 4 or 5 of our board members who have 20 to 30-year-olds. Every one of them knows several people who are positive. And I get phone calls all the time now. My 25-year-old daughter is with her friends. One of them turned out to be positive. What do we do? So it's beginning to creep into everyone's community. And the problem, and one of the reasons why the mortality rate isn't so high, the real problem is in behavior of younger adults in the 20 to 30-year-old range. There was a report on one Texas family, 18 members infected after a birthday party. There was a University of Texas spring break trip to Cabo, came back with 60 students infected. There's another family who went out to a bar in Florida for a birthday party, 16 infected. And so the problem is that people are not taking it seriously, and they're not practicing social distancing and wearing masks. Now, last week, I kept mentioning that I went through the labs, and I found some labs where people were not wearing masks. This week, there are still some people who are not wearing masks, and there's groups of people who sort of cluster in the hallways. And what I've come to realize is it's no longer just enough to take care of yourself. From now on, it's if you see something, you have to say something. If you see people that aren't wearing masks in the hallway, you tell them to put on a mask. If you see people who are not practicing social distancing, tell them to spread apart. It's not just us to take care of. We have to actually take care of everybody else. Now, some good news. Our practice, Baylor Medicine, is actually coming back to life. We went way down, almost 25 or 30% of our volume in the midst of all of the early infection rates. And Dr. McDivitt has been working very hard to bring that volume back up to 100% through telehealth and other ways. But we are on track to be at 90% recovery within a month or two, and we're hopeful that we will get to 100% of our volume. And that's really important because we're providing care to all of our patients, and that in a very safe environment. So I'm really excited that we're beginning to do that. And the other good news is through our surveillance, we've had very, very few people positive at the college. There have been 2 or 3 positive, but they all, through contact tracing, we know they got it in the community and not here. So I think our work environment is as safe as we can make it, and people should feel comfortable to come back to work when they have to. So the last thing I wanted to mention is, the love of my life, Lily. Sorry, honey, is still hanging with me, and I want to thank everybody who has stopped their car or said hello. I must have run into 20 people who mostly want to say hello to Lily, not so much me, but it's nice when people stop and say hello. And the other thing I wanted to say is that Lily got her first request for a date from Oliver. I just want to let Oliver know that she's considering it. She hasn't said yes or no, but she's at least thinking about it. And I also want to thank you all for the many, many comments that you make. I enjoy every single one of them, even the ones that, are often critical, but I like them all, and you should all feel very comfortable to write me at my, president's email. And the last thing I want to mention is that the July 4th weekend is coming up. Start planning now for how you are going to remain safe and how you are going to structure your holiday weekend so that you have fun and get some time off, but you also stay safe. So have a great weekend. Thank you, Baylor College of Medicine. Thank you for everything you do for all of us, not only here, but in the Houston community and in the nation. Thank you. Thank you.